My parents turned my husband against me, convincing him that he deserved someone better. After I couldn't get pregnant, they all, including him and my own family, completely cut me off. I went through some of the hardest times alone. 3 years later, fate brought us face to face again, and they were shocked to see me, happy and holding my little daughter in my arms. My heart dropped to the floor when I saw them at the grocery store. My parents, who I hadn't seen in 3 years, and Trevor, my ex-husband, standing next to them like they were one big family and I was just a stranger passing by. I held my daughter tighter, unable to look away. Trevor had once been my everything, or at least that's what I used to believe. We met when I was 24 and he was 27. It felt like I had finally earned the love not only of a man, but of my own parents too. They had always wanted a son. My father, Ron, never hid it, and my mother, Linda, spoke of her disappointment openly. I spent most of my life trying to be the son they never had, hiding my pain behind fake smiles. When Trevor came into my life, it was like they finally saw something in me. Through him, their sudden warmth felt like a gift I had been chasing my entire life. And like a fool, I accepted it without question. We married quickly. Too quickly. Under their soft pressure, Trevor and I started trying for a baby almost immediately after the wedding. I was only 26, but the fear of losing that fragile happiness made me agree. For years, I had dreamt of a family where I was truly wanted. We tried, month after month, and every failed test felt like another crack in my soul. Then came the diagnosis: infertility. The day we shared the news with both families, my father simply walked out of the room. My mother muttered, "That's unfortunate." Nothing more. I remember sitting on the living room couch, staring out the window, trying to comprehend how my own parents could turn their backs on me because my body couldn't give them a grandchild. A few weeks later, they cut off almost all contact. I kept calling, trying to explain that we could still try IVF, that there was still hope. But their silence said more than words ever could. Trevor stayed by my side at first, but I could see the shift in his eyes. He was slipping away. I blamed myself for everything, for every wrong move, every tear. I cooked his favorite meals, left little notes, tried to erase the emptiness I saw growing between us. But one day, he came home with divorce papers. No explanation, just said he wanted a fresh start. A few weeks later, I learned he had moved in with my parents. That's when I realized the love I thought I had was nothing but an illusion they built to reach their own dream. I had merely been a tool. It took months to gather the pieces of myself and move to a small town by the sea, where no one knew my name or my story. I thought I had left it all behind. But today, holding my daughter close, I realized your nightmares never really leave. They always find a way back. When I stepped out of the store, I saw them immediately. My parents and Trevor standing together across the street. My mother clung to his arm. My father chatted animatedly, and Trevor laughed like nothing had ever happened. I pressed myself against the wall, feeling my heart hammering in my throat. They didn't notice me at first, but when my mother turned her head and our eyes met, it felt like the ground vanished beneath me. I spun around and rushed to my car, their gazes burning into my back. I wanted to disappear, to blend into the air, to become invisible. Everything inside me screamed, "Run." I climbed into the car and sat frozen, unable to even turn the key in the ignition. They were here. So close. My parents, who had erased me from their lives, and my ex-husband, who had betrayed me at my lowest. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence, that they didn't know where I lived, that they weren't following me, that they hadn't come looking for me. But something deep inside refused to believe it. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached, trying to breathe evenly as panic clawed at my chest. Wild thoughts spiraled through my mind. What if they knew? What if they planned this? What if this was the beginning of another war? I remembered standing alone in the kitchen years ago, sobbing after the diagnosis, while they turned their backs. I remembered my mother's cold, dismissive glance and my father silently walking away. I had been nothing to them. Still, I was terrified. Terrified of being crushed again. Terrified they would drag me back into that hell, tear apart the fragile piece I had fought so hard to build over the last 3 years. I thought of the hours spent in therapy, the nights crying into my pillow, the mornings forcing myself to believe there was a future worth hoping for. And now their faces were here again. Their smiles, their casual presence, as if they hadn't shattered me before. Their easy confidence that they could simply walk back into my life. I realized then, if I gave in to even one tiny hope, if I allowed even one crack in my defenses, everything I built would fall apart. I knew I had to protect this new life the way you protect something priceless, even if it meant breaking my own heart all over again. The next morning, my phone buzzed as I was making breakfast. I froze when I saw the caller ID. Trevor. My instinct screamed to let it ring out, to toss the phone across the room and pretend it didn't happen. but a tiny, foolish part of me needed to hear what he had to say. I answered, keeping my voice cold and clipped. He sounded different, hesitant. He asked if we could meet, just talk. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to hang up, but instead I found myself agreeing to meet him at a busy coffee shop, somewhere public, somewhere safe. Sitting across from him felt surreal. Trevor looked older, more worn down, but that easy charm of his was still there, lurking behind every forced smile. He started talking about the past, about mistakes, regrets, missed chances. He said my parents had realized they were wrong, that he had realized it too, that they all wanted to fix things. I listened in silence, my hands wrapped around my coffee cup like a lifeline. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to scream at him for daring to sit there and pretend the past could be erased with a few pretty words. He talked about my daughter. Our daughter, he said, as if he had any right to her. That was when I felt the wall inside me slam shut. I smiled tightly and said nothing, just nodded and let him talk himself in circles. When he finally stopped, looking at me with that hopeful, desperate expression, I stood up. I told him calmly that my life was no longer open for him or anyone else who had abandoned me when I needed them most. I said I was done being a second choice, done being a convenience. Trevor looked like he wanted to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked out, feeling the weight of his stare on my back, but not letting myself look once. Driving home, I fought against the tidal wave of emotions. Grief, anger, betrayal, a small, broken piece of hope that still stupidly existed somewhere deep inside me. I hated that part. I hated that after everything, some part of me still wanted to be wanted. But I knew better now. Words were easy. Change was hard. And the people who had failed me once would fail me again if I let them. I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. A few days later, the letters started showing up. At first, I didn't recognize the handwriting, but when I opened the first envelope and saw my mother's flowery script, my stomach twisted. Inside were pages and pages of apologies, stories about how they had missed me, how they regretted everything, how they had only acted out of fear and love. My hands shook as I read them, but not from sadness, from rage. They hadn't missed me when I cried alone every night after they abandoned me. They hadn't cared when I scraped together the pieces of my life with no family left to call. They missed the idea of me. Or worse, they missed what they thought they could still take from me. Over the next week, more letters came. From my father, from Trevor, all painting the same picture of broken people who just wanted another chance. I wanted to scream, to burn every letter, to drive to their houses and throw them back in their faces. But instead, I kept them, stacking them neatly in a box like evidence. I told myself it was over, that I didn't care, that I was stronger now. But some nights, when the house was quiet and my daughter was asleep, I found myself rereading them, feeling the old wounds reopen. Maybe it was human nature to crave closure that would never come. Then, 2 days ago, they showed up at my house. No warning, no invitation. I looked out the window and saw them standing at the edge of the driveway, Trevor holding a bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers, my parents looking awkward and overly eager. They didn't come because they loved me. They came because now there was a grandchild. I saw it instantly, the way my mother's eyes lit up when she caught a glimpse of my daughter playing inside. She didn't look at me that way. She never had. I didn't open the door. I stood there, hidden behind the curtain, heart pounding, and watched them knock, call my name, even leave little gifts by the door. Baby clothes, a stuffed bear. Like I could be bribed into forgetting everything they had done. I didn't move. I didn't answer. After 20 minutes, they finally left, but I knew it wasn't over. I knew this was just the beginning. They didn't want me. They wanted what I could give them. And I would rather burn my entire life to the ground than let them take one more piece of it. After that day, the pressure started mounting fast. It was little things at first. A letter shoved under my door, a voicemail left at odd hours. A message slipped into my mailbox even though I had changed the locks and told my neighbors not to accept anything on my behalf. I blocked their numbers, ignored the knocks, tore up every note without reading past the first line. But it wasn't enough. Trevor showed up at the daycare one afternoon, asking to pick up his daughter, as if he had any claim to her. Thank God the staff followed protocol and refused to release her. When I got the call from the director, I felt my blood run cold. They were escalating. They weren't going to go away quietly. I reinforced everything. Changed my daughter's daycare, installed more cameras, warned the nanny, even started carrying pepper spray in my purse. I was done playing nice. But the real breaking point came one Friday afternoon. I had just come home from work, juggling groceries in my daughter's backpack, when I saw the note taped to my front door. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a printed photo. Me and my daughter at the park a few days earlier. No message, no explanation, just the image. I dropped the groceries right there on the porch and ran inside, locking every door and window. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial the police. They came, took a report, promised to patrol the area, but I knew deep down it wouldn't stop. Not unless I stopped it myself. That night, my nanny confessed something she had been too scared to tell me before. Trevor had been lurking around the house when I wasn't home. He had even tried talking to her once, asking questions about our schedules, pretending it was casual conversation. She had brushed him off, but it terrified her enough to start taking my daughter to her own house whenever I worked late. I sat there listening, heart pounding, rage bubbling so hot it made me dizzy. They weren't just harassing me anymore. They were threatening the only thing that truly mattered: my child. And if they thought I would just sit back and let them, they didn't know me at all. I had survived them once. I would survive again. But this time, I wasn't going to just survive. I was going to fight. The next morning, I filed for a restraining order. It was easier than I expected, maybe because the officer who took my statement could see the terror written all over my face. Maybe because the photos, the daycare incident, and the nanny's testimony painted a clear enough picture. Whatever the reason, by the end of the week, Trevor was legally barred from coming near me or my daughter. I should have felt relief, and part of me did. But another part waited for the other shoe to drop, because if there was one thing I had learned, it was that people like them didn't give up quietly. True to form, they didn't. The smear campaign began almost immediately. Whispered phone calls to old friends, passive-aggressive posts on Facebook, snide comments made through mutual acquaintances. According to them, I was keeping a child from her real family, acting out of spite, ruining poor Trevor's chance at happiness. It was laughable, really. If it hadn't made me so sick with rage, I might have laughed. Instead, I dug in my heels. I made it clear to everyone who tried to mediate that there was no going back. No explanations, no apologies, no more second chances. My parents apparently weren't handling the new reality any better than Trevor was. A neighbor told me they showed up at my old house once, confused and angry when they realized I didn't live there anymore. Another friend mentioned hearing about my mental instability from an anonymous source, an obvious attempt to paint me as the problem. It didn't work. I had spent 3 years building a life so solid, so fiercely protected, that no amount of gossip could shake it. Still, the fact that they were so desperate to rewrite the narrative was proof enough that cutting them out had been the right choice. They weren't sorry. They were bitter they had lost control. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't correct the lies. I didn't send angry texts or confrontations. I stayed silent. I stayed steady. I stayed free. And for the first time in years, I realized that their approval, the thing I had chased for so long, was meaningless. I didn't need their love. I didn't need their validation. I had everything I needed in the small hand that clutched mine at night, in the sleepy smile that greeted me every morning. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was my daughter's mother. And that was enough. I should have known they wouldn't give up that easily. A few weeks after the restraining order was finalized, one of my old coworkers, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, reached out. She said she'd been contacted by my parents. They had asked her to put in a good word for them, to help rebuild bridges because they were so heartbroken over everything that had happened. I almost laughed when I read the message. They weren't heartbroken over losing me. They were desperate now that they realized they couldn't force their way back into my life. Still, it rattled me more than I wanted to admit. They were trying to worm their way back in through the cracks, using pity and guilt like weapons. A few days later, I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from my mother. Inside, a photo of my daughter, one I had posted months ago on a private account, one I thought only close friends could see. The note underneath was short. She deserves her family. We won't give up. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the paper. They were watching. Still. I reported it to my lawyer, who added it to the growing file. But the damage was done. Every time I stepped outside, every time I posted a photo, every time I laughed a little too loudly in public, a part of me wondered who was watching. I tightened my circle even more, locking down my accounts, warning my friends to be cautious. I couldn't afford to slip up, not when they were so clearly looking for any opening. Then, one afternoon, I overheard two women talking at the park while I pushed my daughter on the swings. They didn't see me. They didn't know who I was. But one of them said, "It's so sad, isn't it?" That poor man. He just wants to see his kid. I knew immediately they were talking about Trevor. And I knew where they had gotten the story. My parents had been spreading it everywhere they could, painting me as the villain. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. I had accepted long ago that in their story, I would always be the villain because it was easier than admitting their own failures. As I pushed the swing higher, Feeling the cool breeze on my face, I made a promise to myself. Let them talk. Let them lie. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. My daughter's laughter was louder than their whispers, and that was the only sound that mattered. It's been months now since the last time I heard anything from them. No more letters, no more voicemails, no more strange cars lingering outside my house. I don't know if they finally gave up or simply found a new target for their need to control, but either way, I'm grateful. Life feels different now. Quieter, safer. My daughter is growing fast, her laughter filling every corner of our little home, her presence grounding me in ways nothing else ever could. Some nights when the house is silent and the world feels far away, I think about everything we survived. About the girl I used to be. The one who would have dropped everything at the first hint of approval. Who would have sacrificed her own happiness just to be loved by people who never deserved her. That girl is gone. She had to be. For both our sakes. In her place stands someone stronger. Someone who knows her worth is not tied to anyone's acceptance. I don't miss them. Not really. Sometimes I mourn the idea of family, the fantasy of parents who would have loved me unconditionally, a partner who would have stayed no matter how hard things got. But I don't mourn the reality. The reality was abandonment, betrayal, cruelty masked as concern. I've built something better now. Something real. I see it every morning in the sleepy smile of my daughter as she pads into my room with her blanket dragging behind her. I see it in the messy crayon drawings taped to the fridge, the giggles during bath time, the whispered, "I love you, Mommy," before bed. They wanted to break me. They thought I would crumble without them. Instead, I thrived. Instead, I built a life so full of love and light that their shadows can't reach me anymore. I'm not a daughter desperate for scraps of affection. I'm not a wife begging to be enough. I'm a mother who would burn the world down before letting it touch her child. And that, I've realized, is the kind of family my daughter deserves. A family that fights for her. A family that chooses her every single day. I'm not scared anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just free. And for the first time in my life, that's more than enough.